All right. I'd like to call the Business and Governance Committee meeting to order for Thursday, January 7th. First is new business, and we have an action requested, staff's recommendation to revise Board Rule 7.60 for adjudicator hearings, scheduling, and pre-hearing meetings. Johnny Tran.
Yeah, Val, could we just, for the record, point out that we have a quorum and ask if there's any public comment before we start that?
Thank you. Thank you for that kind reminder. Hearing no public comment and having established a quorum, it's your floor.
Thank you, Val. So this rule was discussed and passed 4-0 at the Disability Committee about half an hour ago, and the recommended changes will match what the board did in September 2015 when it had conflicts in the evidence. Cases for disability retirement applications referred to hearing without further board action. So the strikeout simply recognizes that the board doesn't take further action on these.
All right. Next, so although it's an action item, we're not taking action on this.
We would need to vote.
Yeah. Okay. The motion's been made to approve by Dick Wilkin. I've seconded it.
Ready to vote.
And the motion carries 4-0. And that brings us to item 2, which is the non-action item, review of Board Rule 9.60. Mr. Tran.
Right. With this board rule, the review of this board rule, the board will have completed its 3-year review of all the policies, charters, and board rules, and I appreciate your patience in all of that. Staff has reviewed this rule and does not recommend any changes.
Is there any comment from members of the committee? Appears there is none, so that takes care of that item. Johnny, thank you for participating in this thorough review. Are you ready to start the next one now?
In about 2 years, yeah.
Okay. That brings us to old business. Item number 1, staff's recommendation to revise Board Rule 7.30.
Thank you, Val. The Disability and Board discussed this in the last meeting in November 2015, and because of trustee recommendations, we suggested new language today. The Disability Committee discussed this at length, and it passed 4-0 with the new changes as suggested. I'll take any questions you may have.
Does anybody want to have Johnny go over these? They are fairly extensive, but you were here earlier. Okay.
I will say that this initially I had a number of questions about this and concerns, but I think that by going from 3 years instead of 18 months originally recommended to 2 years, and also the fact that there may be a few outliers that will take longer than this, but we've been reassured that we can waive the board policy on a case-by-case basis if needed. So I'm comfortable with it.
Thank you for those comments. I hear no other comments, so we need a motion and a second. Once again, Dick Wilkins made the motion, and I've seconded it.
Ready to vote.
And the motion carries 4-0. Bringing us to 2 non-action items. First is the report on overpayments and underpayments to members exceeding $10,000, and that'll be Ms. Voorhees-Rossman.
Good morning. So I wanted to give you a quick update that has happened since I prepared this report. Ms. Vieira has informed us that she does intend to appeal, so we're waiting for that information to come through, and imagine that will eventually end up back in front of you. Also wanted to let you know that we do have one member who we reported to you back in July who is still outstanding. All the other members we've reported over the last couple of years have been resolved, but we do have a city member, Mr. Stevens Esweda, who still is outstanding, and one of the issues we have on this one is he's an active member, and it is contributions he owes us for, so we don't have any ability to force him to pay us those monies. We've let him know that he cannot retire in a drop until he resolves this issue. We've also made it very clear to him that this continues to accrue interest until he resolves it. And we've discussed reaching out again to him and reminding him of those facts. But at this point, the ball is squarely in his court. We've let him know what the issues are, and he has not filed an appeal, and his time period to file an appeal has passed.
Is there a specific interest rate that's been provided to him?
We provided to him the current actuarial rate, which at the time was 7.25%.
All right. Any questions or comments?
Okay.
There are none. Thank you for the report. Next, we have a discussion of Public Employment Relations Board decision relating to Prop B. Mr. Tran.
Thank you. This is a non-action item just up for discussion. So as you know, in 2012, the voters of the city of San Diego passed Proposition B, which generally speaking closed the defined benefit plan for the city employees with the exception of sworn police officers. 4 city unions filed a complaint with the California Public Employment Relations Board, PERB, contending, among other things, that the city failed to meet and confer with the unions prior to supporting that proposition in violation of the Myers-Milius-Brown Act. So last week, on December 29th, the PERB issued a ruling finding that the city violated the law and ordered the city to, among other things, meet and confer with the unions, to reimburse the unions for its costs and attorney's fees for the union's anticipated legal action to overturn Proposition B, and to make the affected employees that aren't part of the defined benefit plan whole. Notably, PERB acknowledged that it has no authority to overturn the municipal election. The city can appeal this decision, and we understand that next week they are meeting in closed session to discuss that option. Importantly for SDCERS and the trustees here, Proposition B is still the law, and so SDCERS will still enforce Proposition B pending any outcome of any decision by the unions, the city, through the court system. We'll continue to monitor these developments in these issues. We'll keep this board informed of what's going on and work with the city and the city on any outcomes in the court proceedings. SDCERS' call staff has already been educated on the issue and has been addressing phone calls regarding this. So I know Mark wants to say something about this, and then we can answer any questions you may have.
Regarding the number of calls, I understand from Cynthia Queen, we've had 3 retired members so far that have called, just wondering if the PERB ruling has any impact on them. So, as Johnny pointed out, SERS, well, my words, we don't really have a horse in this race. We're really not advocating or for or against any particular position here. So we're waiting for the city to decide how they want to respond to the PERB complaint. The city has reached, through the mayor's office, has reached out to me asking for some assistance in actuarial modeling to look at the financial ramifications of putting people in a DB plan if that were to come to pass. So we are working on providing that assistance to the city. Of course, the city would be paying for those costs. Doesn't really involve much staff time. So we're working on that at the moment. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question that may be more for Johnny, but it is about the process of an appeal. If the city doesn't appeal, what are the consequences from the perspective of the pension fund? And then if it does appeal, what's the timing and where does it go?
Well, the appeal would be, the appeal that we discussed would be appealing the PERB ruling to the 4th District Court of Appeal, and whether or not the decision or the requirements of the PERB board are enforceable against the city. I think that's somewhat separate than whether or not Proposition B will be overturned. So PERB itself has recognized that you can't overturn a municipal election. So if they don't appeal...
There would have to be a subsequent lawsuit in court,
yes,
to affect Prop B.
Yes, I believe so. And Chris, if you want to chime in on that, because Chris has appeared before PERB, so he may have some information that I don't. But that's my understanding.
That was a very long time ago. Apart from the city, is this on? Apart from the city and the employee organizations, the other player in this dispute, although they were not a party in the PERB proceedings, is of course the proponents of the measure. So there are any number of possible litigation scenarios that may develop as a result of this. The first step, as Johnny indicated, is what the city's decision is with respect to taking the matter up. And Val, I think you're the only lawyer on the panel, but it's actually by way of a writ of mandate to the 4th DCA. After that decision, then I think any number of dominoes may fall into place, but I have no idea at this point in time what they might be. The other aspect of the PERB decision that's sort of interesting is that the part of the PERB remedy, apart from the make-whole order, is an order that the city reimburse the unions for any litigation costs with respect to challenging the validity of Prop B in light of the PERB decision.
Thank you.
I was on the queue only to reiterate that Mark already addressed the fact that we're going to support the city in terms of crunching numbers, and I just want us to liberally do that because I think that that we can aid the process by being responsive to those things that only we can do and our actuary can do. So I'm good.
Great. I do want to clarify, though, that we're not supporting the city in the sense of supporting their position. We're simply allowing the city to use actuarial services to model the consequences of different actions it might take.
Correct.
Val, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
The phrase I use to characterize, and I've had other client systems in similar situations, is you're in essence in the position of being a neutral broker of information at this point in time.
Good point. The neutral broker of information is a role that I think we can comfortably assume. All right. That leads us to status reports, and first is legal services.
Sure, thank you. You have my report in front of you. A few things to highlight. We will be submitting the Ports IRS determination letter application this month. The city and airport already have received their up-to-date determination letters. Last December, Mark and I spoke again at the San Diego City Charter Review Committee in support of the board's recommended changes to the city charter. We're expected to talk again in March about our recommendation that the city amend its charter to have the ability to cover any overpaid benefits to retirees. And we're also slated to speak at the Economic Development and Intergovernmental Relations Committee in January to advocate the ability for port and airport employees to run for our member seat on our board.
Do we know yet from those discussions which ones of our recommendations seem to be still in the loop?
Yeah, I don't know if anything has been finalized, but I have an idea of which recommendations seem to be going forward and which ones have not. Would you like a breakdown of that?
Please.
Sure. So the board had recommended that police recruits be able to be in the defined benefit plan. That was pulled by the city attorneys as a meet and confer item to which the committee wouldn't discuss on. So that hasn't gained any traction yet. The committee seemed in favor of amending the charter to recognize reciprocal service for vesting purposes, something we do now. Again, I talked about underpaid contributions, overpaid benefits. Well, for underpaid contributions, that isn't getting any traction because the city attorney's office has opined that Proposition B prohibits the city council from paying any contributions on behalf of the employees until the charter is changed. So that hasn't gained any traction. It looks like they're in support of SDCERS' ability to hire its own counsel, something I like. They're supportive of staggering trustee terms, so we don't have as much heavy turnover at one time as we've done historically.
Although they wanted to do that through the municipal code change and not through the charter.
Thank you. It doesn't appear the committee supports amending the charter to clarify that this board has plenary authority to invest the way it wants to and to get rid of the old language that exists there simply because they believe we have that power anyway through the Constitution, and that would just be unnecessary cleanup. So we're going to continue to do what we do based on the Constitution. Let's see here. and I've discussed port and airport members and retirees running for elected seats.
What about us allowing attorneys to qualify for board positions?
Yeah, that was suggested language, and that seemed to carry forward. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed that.
All right,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
great. So that brings us to David Bond and IT.
Good morning. I really only have one update to my report, and that is our year-to-date, or our calendar year 15 total help desk tickets. We had a total of 2,213 tickets called into our internal help desk, so that is staff only, and that averages 42 per week. So Ray Lawler over here is our point person on the help desk, so I'd like to thank him because he's got a busy job.
Thank you, Ray.
And that's it.
All right. Cynthia Queen with Member Services Report.
Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you all for being here to serve with us again. Wanted to give you a couple of highlights. First, you'll note that I had discussed the annual member statements, which were sent to about 10,000 of our members, all of those who are not yet retired or who have entered drop. So it would include folks that are still working, but also those who had left city employment perhaps even 20 years ago, but left funds on account with us. It's similar to a statement you might receive from your investment accounts. Now, this was the first time we had sent these statements to city members, although we had sent it to the port and airport for the last 4 years. This was a big project, making sure that all our formatting and reports were running correctly. But we also knew that it would generate some phone calls. And some might ask why we bother sending a piece of paper to folks and why we didn't just do this electronically, which I would prefer to do. But the answer is that people who are not yet retired don't necessarily pay attention to their retirement accounts, and we wanted to make sure that they were. So we put forth this effort, and I'm very pleased that it was a huge success. It generated responses and phone calls that helped us with a number of data projects that we're always working on to ensure that they're up to date. So for example, for these members who are not yet retired, some of them went away a long time ago and haven't updated their address with us for a long time. We had nearly 500 members update their addresses with us, which was excellent response from just sending a letter. We need to be able to get a hold of these folks. Additionally, there are people who are not vested, would never be eligible to retire for the system, maybe left 20 years ago and had 3 years of service, but left those funds on account. Now, some of these people actually forget about that money, and I heard from a few people who were pretty happy about that. In general, we get maybe 4 requests per month for people who are not vested who want to take a refund. But from this effort, over a 2-month period, we had 50 requests for refunds, which is just an excellent way of cleaning up our data, reminding people of the money that they have, giving some people a holiday present, and just making sure people are aware of their finances. So that was a very impressive response to that. And additionally, we had members update their beneficiaries. It's very important, even though you're not yet retired, active members need to have their beneficiaries updated. And I speak from experience personally that we are very apathetic about that. So that was an excellent effort. We had a great increase in the use of the portal, as well as people calling up just to figure out how they could take care of it non-electronically. So I'd like to commend the call center staff who took hundreds of calls on this matter, and also Jessica Packard, who did an excellent job of coordinating this mailing. So I'm very pleased with the success of that. Additionally, I'd like to update you on a project or a topic that only affects about 60 of our members. Even though it's such a very small population, it is a big deal to those members, and it is a big work pill for us here at staff, so it's important. We have some folks who are affected by Internal Revenue Code 415, which dictates how they receive their pension benefits that exceed a certain limit. And so in order to facilitate that, all 3 of our plan sponsors set up a preservation of benefits fund, and those members get paid out of 2 funds. They get paid the exact same amount, but it's just the complication of having to pay them out of 2 different accounts. For the member, the complication is getting your taxes straight. So each year, this has been a pretty good sized project for us to make sure that we properly communicate to members and to get the actuarial valuation from the previous year back in time to get those payments going in January. more challenging than you might think. So last year, we all made a pact that we were going to make sure this year would go perfectly. And so we had started our planning a year ago. And with finance, benefits administration, and member services, we worked together. We were able to obtain the actuarial information early from Chiron, who you know is doing a lot of other work for us as well. Monty Pareto worked very hard to generate those numbers over the holidays while I was happily on vacation. And his staff members, Bonnie Schmid, Paul Detchen, and Maria Gonzalez, are working away right now to ensure that the proper amounts will come out of those checks. Jessica Packard, over the holiday, was able to do the mail merge and get those letters out the door to those folks. But I particularly want to recognize one of my colleagues who's sitting back here, Avi O'Brien. Avi is a CPA and in our finance group. And Avi has done a great deal of work to be able to help us separate numbers, pull all of this together, train with the call center, really was just a major player in this project. And I just wanted to recognize Avi because I don't know that she's ever been downstairs before, that you've ever seen her. So thank you, Avi, very much. I did check in with the call center again today, and that process has gone very smoothly. So finally, I just want to mention that we are really enhancing our seminar outreach this year. This morning, Antonio Roberti and Jessica Packard are up at San Diego State with the police recruiting division, giving a presentation on the details of the most recent police tier so that they can work with recruiting new officers. Thank you very much for listening to all of that.
Thank you, Cynthia. Any questions or comments? Great. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you for your report, and thank you, Avi. All right. That brings us next to Benefits Administration and Marcel Voorhees-Rossman once again.
Hello again. Tall people, short people, keep moving this around. A couple things I wanted to add. One of the first things I talked about in my report to you all was that we did some realignments in Member Services and Benefits Administration, and we moved the health team and the death benefits processing under Sandra Clausen. That's in place. We're getting a lot of cross-training going on there, and it's been working out very well, so we're happy with that change. One of the things that I mentioned, and that also was mentioned by Dave Bond, but Dave, you didn't really highlight it that much. We are done with IRIS warranty. This is huge. This is a huge accomplishment. 18 months after go live, we finished it. We've talked to Sagitech. They have systems that have been live for 5 years that are still working on warranty items. So this was a really big project. It was led by Monty Pareto, Fong Nguyen, Bonnie Schmidt, Sandra Clausen, Avi O'Brien, Cynthia Queen, and Michelle Wegner. So that's really a huge accomplishment. So now we're into the next phase of it, which is, does it do exactly what we want? Are there other things that we can make it do? What do we need to go from here? So we're focusing on January on some data cleanup. When you convert that many records and that much information, there are things that need to be corrected. The data cleanup we need to do does not impact members' benefits. It doesn't impact their calculations, but it just makes the data cleaner. And so some of it is a carryover from Pension Gold, our old system, where it should have been cleaned up there. So we're working on that in January. February, we're going to work on improvements to the member portal, and something that I know is near and dear to Mark is our online applications. So we're going to continue working on that and get that process finalized, again, in talking with other systems that allow members to start their application for retirement online, report that they have an extremely high utilization of that. So we're looking forward to getting that in place. And then the final thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is the PORT plan. I know Johnny mentioned that we're working with them to submit for their determination letter, and we spent quite a bit of time with them working on their plan, trying to make sure that their amendments, they have 5 amendments, are actually incorporated into the document, as well as some changes they want to make in the language, not changing anything the plan says, but making it clear for their members who are trying to read those documents. So we're going to continue working with the PORT this month and next month to get their plan document cleaned up a little bit. And with that, if there's any questions on anything?
Congratulations to you and your team on the resolution of all the warranty items.
Thank you. It was very exciting.
One thing I wanted to add in the list of names that Marcel called out, she neglected to mention one person, and that's Marcel. No one has worked harder than Marcel over the last 3 years on getting the IRIS system to where it is today. You know, when she came to SDCERS a few years ago, having completed a nice long period of time within the city controller staff, she was one of the linchpins at the city that successfully got them through the conversion with the SAP system. And that experience has paid dividends here at SDCERS. He's done a remarkably good job getting us where we're at today, so thank you for that.
Thank you. No more system conversions for a while.
Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to finance and Ted LaSalvia.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Happy New Year. For the record, we mentioned Avi O'Brien, and I want you to understand Avi O'Brien works in the finance department.
That's the third time her name's come up in this meeting.
That's right. So, and you will hear it a fourth time during the presentations here. If I can take these items in a little bit different order, let's start with the September budget versus actual. Rather than go through the individual line items, you folks have my report and the budget statements in front of you. As a result, there's a general theme here. Over the past, when we've done restructuring and whatnot, you might have noticed that in salaries and fringe benefits, we were always under and we were playing catch-up. We're still a little bit under, but we expect to be fully staffed here shortly, as you heard from Marcel Rossman. There's always a certain amount of change that goes on in the organization that requires us to make changes in our assumptions. So there's a couple of themes here with the budget versus actual. The first is related to the staffing, as I just mentioned. The second is, once again, we're running under budget on the litigation cost side, the legal cost side, which is always a good thing, but you'll notice that the amount is a much smaller savings at this point in time. Once again, when we developed the FY16 budget, we had to actually estimate a potential cost for litigation, and right now those costs have not been realized, which is actually a very good thing. The fourth item, and probably the most significant in this budget, relates to the investment management fees. So we have approximately a $1.5 million difference between what we have spent versus what we had budgeted for the quarter, about 14% under budget. Looks great. Well, if you look at the management fees, you'll notice that the majority of those savings arise there. Once again, the budget process requires us to estimate where we will be given certain factors, and as you are well aware, the investment climate has been very challenging here during FY16.
So that's not such good news, more bad news.
Yes, but I expect to save money at the same time. So with that, I'll open it to any questions you might have on the budget.
Only an accountant could think that way.
Have to find the positives wherever I can. No questions on the budget? With that, I will turn over to the October financial statements. And once again, the last set of financials, so you have the September and October financial statements before you. I will focus on the latest information in the Octobers. At the last B&G meeting, I focused on the August financials, which weren't very good. The process isn't dramatically different than the theme we had actually portrayed back in August, but there were improvements. So as a result, from an operational standpoint, our net decrease in our pension assets were $110 million for the 4 months ending October 31st. This is in comparison to a $265 million loss that we had reported back in August. So there we did see some improvement there. Lastly, the reserves actually increased slightly, and that's primarily because of the fact that we received the ADC payments at the beginning in full, and we invest them completely for investment purposes, but we recognize the income ratably throughout the fiscal year. And with that, I will open it up to any questions you may have on the financial statements themselves.
You have no questions.
Lastly, the finance staff report. As I mentioned, I presented the October financials. Finance currently is up to date through November of 2015. We are currently working on our December 2015 close. In addition, within your cubbies, if you haven't noticed, you will see a printed bound version of our FY15 CAFR. I'd like to stress that this CAFR is now complete. The printed copies are available, and we have filed this with the GFOA to hopefully receive the award for this particular CAFR. With respect to current priorities, once again, Avi O'Brien's name is going to come into play because we're in the middle of the 1099-R W-2 process, which is a really large transactional, detailed process that accounting goes through every year. And because it's a learning process, issues that arose in the prior fiscal year were items that became part of our testing sequence here for the end of the FY15 calendar year. I was informed this morning, per Avi, that we will be in position to post those 1099s today. We'll go through the file and submit that so that those forms can go out to our members as soon as possible. And with that, I will open the floor to any final questions you may have.
Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Ted.
Thank you.
That brings us to questions and comments from the chair, trustees, and staff. Mark, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, sir.
All right. Then we have no non-docket items that I'm aware of, and so we can adjourn the meeting. Are we adjourning into closed session or we're not? We're not. This is it. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Meeting adjourned.